If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
Right. So that's why this all works. So because Mark has no enunciation, because Mark lacks any infancy narrative, there's no reason to believe that Mark thinks there's anything unusual about Jesus' birth.
Yeah, my name's Bob from New York. I had a question about Mark 3:21. Jesus was preaching to a multitude, and his family or friends came to lay hold on him because they said he was beside himself. In one version, in another version, it says he was out of his mind. Right. And if that's his family trying to come and take him home, and they think he's out of his mind, doesn't make sense that, an angel spoke to Joseph, and an angel spoke to Mary, and the Magi fell down and worshipped. If all those things really happened, it wouldn't be a shock. How could he be out of his mind? It wouldn't be a shock that he's saying and doing all these things. So that's my question. It doesn't make sense. Thank you.
That's very interesting. So in the Greek, to be beside yourself is another way to say that you're nuts or the person is crazy. So this is very interesting. This is Mark 3:21. And the reason why these passages are so striking is because you know how we spend so much time discussing texts that appear in Matthew and Luke but do not appear in the book of Mark, right? We've talked about that, and that source is called the Q source. Well, here we're going to find a text that appears in the book of Mark, but whoever wrote Luke and Matthew didn't want to touch it. So it doesn't appear in those Gospels, and you can figure out exactly why right now. So the context is Jesus is going around and he's healing people. Everybody is angry at him. The Pharisees are angry at him. When his family heard about this, they took him away because they thought he was crazy. This text is really wild. Why? Because you pointed out perfectly. If Mary received information directly from the angel Gabriel in chapter 1, in the Annunciation, in telling her that despite the fact that she's a virgin, she is pregnant and the Holy Spirit has come upon her and she's going to call the baby Jesus because he is the Son of God, and that's why you as a virgin had to conceive. So she has all that information. She knows he's the Son of God. In the book of Matthew, Joseph is getting all this information from the angel. That means everybody's on the in that this is a particularly unique child who is miraculously conceived. Well, if you know the kid is miraculously conceived, why do you think he's crazy? Solve that issue. You should be able to solve this in 1 second. Does the author of the book of Mark know anything about Jesus' miraculous conception? No. In the book of Mark, remember, the second gospel is chronologically the earliest. The book of Mark was written probably 10 to 15 years before Matthew and Luke. Right? There is nothing unusual about the way Jesus was conceived as far as Mark goes. And when we open the book of Mark, what do we find? What do we encounter? We're introduced to Jesus as an adult. We encounter the incipit and then the baptism. He's an adult already. Where Jesus is then told that he's the Son of God from a voice from heaven. So it works in Mark that his family thinks he's nuts. And again, the context is very critical because the context is that everybody is against him. Now, that theme that everyone's against Jesus is really all over the Gospels. It is everywhere, in all 4 Gospels, repeatedly. He came to his own, but they received him not. That's the prologue of John 1:11. A prophet is not without honor except from his own countrymen. So that theme that there's an ongoing theme in the Christian Bible. Those who logically should have believed in him rejected him, and those who shouldn't have believed in him that is, the Gentiles, did believe him. That's the whole irony. And the way Mark ends with the centurion recognizing that at the cross, saying he truly is the Son of God, what's the point of that? So what's a centurion? A centurion is not just a Roman soldier. It's not just a high-ranking Roman soldier. That's like a general. That's huge. He represents the empire. A centurion could have you executed. A centurion was a very, very high level. He represents Rome. So Rome gets it, but his family doesn't, but the Jews don't. So that's what's so interesting. And that's why, although Matthew and Luke pick up on Mark chapter 3, verse 31 through 34, where his mother and his brother are sitting outside, and someone told him, hey, your family's there. And then Jesus turns to his disciples and says, you are my family. That they pick up, but not the part where his family thinks that he's crazy or beside himself. And right, so that's why this all works. So because Mark has no enunciation, because Mark lacks any infancy narrative, there's no reason to believe that Mark thinks there's anything unusual about Jesus' birth. And therefore, Mark 3:21 works. I should say that there are some translators, just as a note, there are some translators that try to work around this problem by saying in 3:21, they don't say his family. So the NIV does have it correctly, his family. The New Revised Standard Version has it correctly. There are some translators that I try to work around this problem, like the Revised Standard Version, the King James, that render it his friends rather than his family. So the language there is those who are very close to him. And because it doesn't mean his disciples are friends because they're already in the house, it's a torturous rendition. So it's very obvious this is a highly inconvenient passage. And I told you this a long time ago. It can safely be said that every person sharing our planet who has read the book of Mark has already read the book of Matthew. And as a result, when people read Mark, it's all colored by their reading of Matthew. The key point to bear in mind is that according to Mark, there is no virgin birth, there's no annunciation, there's none of that stuff, no angel appearing to. In fact, Joseph doesn't even appear in the book of Mark. And I've addressed this in another show, which I'm not going to go into now. So you wouldn't expect to find Joseph anywhere in the book of Mark. And in fact, in Mark 6:3, it's Jesus that's the tecton rather than Joseph for a whole different reason. So great question. And you could see when you have this anomaly where something appears in Mark, but Matthew and Luke consider it radioactive, they just drop it completely. Thank you for your question.
If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון נולד, אשר מלך, בטרם כל יציר נברא, ועת נעשה בחפצו כל. אזי מלך שמו נקרא, ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא